green slips. If you've turned in the counselor, that's fine. If not, you're going to just turn this in tomorrow to me. They're going to type it all in. I envy that job. And actually, they're really good at getting this done very quickly, but they won't have one of these filled out. Okay. Okay. I assume they're okay. I'm not sure what they'll do with that. I mean, my guess is it won't be done. But everyone else, if you have it done, have it signed, I'll hand them all together as a group, or you can drop it off your counter yourself, but it might be easier just, I'm going to take them all up there. If you don't have it today, please bring it tomorrow. And as I've said before, take as many classes as possible. Sign up for ones that you are thinking about, you're not 100% sure. You can always go back and change it, but you will regret it if you don't. That was a perfect throw. Did you see that? Totally fooled you.
I was like, oh, yes, I don't get one.
So I looked the defense on. All right, so please have that in. Please by tomorrow, so we can get that. I'll run that up there. If you have any questions, there's some I can answer, but the big ones you can send a note to your counselor or whatever, and they're better at answering those things. But take as many or sign up for classes. We have great electives here in every department. I would highly recommend them. And so let's get to me throwing that on the ground. Homework. So I signed this over the weekend, but I want to give you a paper copy of this. It's an excerpt from The Jungle, but also a couple other excerpts from various things. The last one's more just humorous. Humorous in a dark way, all the things they used to add to food. But as you read this, please pay attention to examples of cutthroat competition. How they're trying to save money to undercut their competitors. And read a little bit about the explanation, but Upton Sinclair was writing about the plight of immigrants and workers. But since he focused on many of the places where the main character worked at 1,000 different places. More than any one person could do in a lifetime. He wanted to show this vast experience. But this really hit people because of the places he worked. So there are 9 questions, but you only have to do 5 of them. A couple sentences each on a separate sheet of paper. You know the routine. And the questions are 3, 4, 6, 8, 9. 3, 4, 6, 8, 9. So this dropped over the weekend, but I really have to do on Wednesday. But then I kept on thinking Wednesday. Now wait a second. I wasn't thinking the Monday off. So even though I'm not going to change the date on the thing, I'll let you turn it on by Thursday. Sound good? Yes.
Is it like last time?
No. No. The only extra credit you get is you know you're done. That's actually a nice thing. No. And so please read this. It's pretty amazing, but this would have incredible impact on the United States. Not what Sinclair necessarily wanted. He wanted something else, but still, great impact. And so let's go ahead then and get to imperialism. I was kind of off on all 3 classes. So I know I got to populism, the election of 1896, the effects of money, urban politics. Also, there was a growing feeling in the United States that reform of capitalism is going to happen. It's got to happen. And in class, were you able to watch when I talked about the Wizard of Oz? Must have got right to here. Yeah, the Wizard of Oz is in many ways an allegory of populism. It's an allegory. So it tells the story of populism. Bob was kind of pro-populism, but also knowing the popularity of it. And so Mary Lease, one of the leading founders of populism, which was in Kansas. Gee, I wonder where Dorothy was from. What color shoes did Dorothy wear? That was for the movie, though. They were silver, free silver. Oz, O-Z, abbreviation for ounces. There's a bunch of different references. The Emerald City in green, greenbacks, money. The Wizard of Oz, that's probably McKinley. The Cowardly Lion. Didn't I mention a politician who they thought might not really mean it? Was Brian the Cowardly Lion? That's kind of the attitude. Farmers, industrial workers. The Yellow Brick Road started out really beautiful and great and looked fantastic, but the road fell apart as they went. Like the gold standard. And there's more and more and more. The Wicked Witch were banks. Flying monkeys were, you've seen the movie or the book, they're really scary. The flying monkeys are railroads. Are flying monkeys good or bad? Could they be both? You think how great it would be to have a flying monkey. You think about it. Think of the implications of it. So, that's the Wizard of Oz. One more thing I'll show you. This was an ad this was in the 90s, but I thought this was hilarious. It's exactly the truth. It teams up with three strangers to kill again. Okay, so let's get to imperialism. Imperialism. We've talked about imperialism before. We talked about Britain, the United States breaking away, forming the new country. But imperialism, just so remember, imperialism is the creation of course, empire. It's hard to really get to empire with a mask on, but just imagine I'm really getting into it. Oh, I'm not sharing my screen. Sorry for all you people at home. I'm going to go back so you can read that. The people at home, I didn't share the screen. I just think that's hilarious. So, it's empire for profit, for profit. So there must be prestige or money. That's why countries create an empire. And so many of the wars in world history will be imperial wars. Wars for empire. By the imperial comes from Rome. Imperator. That's what the title Caesar would take. It's essentially kind of like a dictator, and they just kind of stop. And so, mercantilism is a main element of this. You should remember mercantilism. That's the idea of getting colonies to suck the wealth out and then maximize your imports, so you're sucking in money. And the colonies will provide raw materials. The colonies will provide a market. There are two different types of imperialism we have to worry about. Colonial imperialism, and that's literally taking a colony, and this shows the attitude, for example, the British had to the colonists in Burma. If you wonder why Burma has so many problems right now, yes, directly relates to colonialization. This is the German colony of German West Africa, which is now Namibia. And I think this really shows it pretty well. They're colonists, and look at the chains. I mean, they're not even hiding. These are the Hottentots, and that's the German colonists. So that's literally taking over an area, putting your flag, governing it. We think of colonies, that's what we think of most of the time. I'm guessing you are too. The 13 colonies were this. The other type is economic, and economic, the countries are still technically independent, but the trade is controlled by the imperial power. And here's a Cuban cartoon of U.S. economic imperialism. And here's Uncle Sam, this is from about 1912, and with its tentacles sucking up the Caribbean and taking it. And sucking up the wealth, even though the countries were still technically independent. The U.S. would do this. And so that's what we're talking about. And don't forget, the United States has already been basically doing this. The United States conquered the areas that American Indians lived on. They colonized it, they made them states. So they made it equal parts of the country, took it over, conquered the people who lived there, but it's a little different than what's going to happen after about 1890. The first big example of this you can see in 1867, the United States would purchase, everyone dubbed it Seward's Folly after William Seward, the Secretary of State, but it's Alaska. And it was also called Russian America. And a lot of people were mocking him by just buying a big chunk of ice. So there's Secretary of State Seward. They bought it partially to keep it out of British hands, partially because Russia didn't want it anymore, and Russia supported the Union in the Civil War, so kind of taking them off. But two things about it. First off, that's Alaska by 1898. Pretty darn good map. But look at it when the U.S. purchased it. They knew it was someplace here. They hadn't fully explored that. And this would be a colony of the United States, and for the most part, Americans didn't think too much of it until 1898. There was sometimes it's called the Klondike, sometimes you call it the Yukon or the Alaska Gold Rush. And this hit just at a time that got to help the U.S. get out of the panic. What is it? I want to say South Foley, but it's not. Sacache Pass. Each miner was forced to carry 1,000 pounds up this 1,000-foot pass. So they made many trips carrying it. Just out to this incredible story, this gold rush. Obviously, we don't have time to go in that. But that's Alaska. I know, it's one of my things. You have to do this a special topic. That was fun. Okay, I'm fascinated by gold rushes. But the U.S., for the most part, at least out in the border, outside the borders of the continent of the U.S., he didn't Washington's farewell address. Now, we've already had this once before, so you don't need to write down the address. But the big thing he's saying is, avoid permanent alliances, stay out of the foreign world. He's talking about imperial wars. Don't get involved in these things. Remember, Britain and France fought all of these wars, and the United States did not want to get involved in it. And some of these were very much religious wars. The U.S. just wanted to stay out of it. And so basically, Washington's farewell address was heated. But by the 1890s, the United States began to look at it more like, that's a quaint idea, but now the U.S. is strong, and we can do what we want. And so that's leading to the reasons for Empaaaaah. Now, this is a cartoon made in 1900, and I love this one for lots of reasons. First off, you have Uncle Sam of Columbia, so like the parents of the country, and look at all the children. And this shows the expanding American empire. And so you have a worker, businessman, farmer, but then Cuba, Puerto Rico, Philippines, Hawaiian Islands. We'll talk a little bit more how they draw them, but now they're all parts of this happy family. And then for some reason I can't explain, there appears to be a mostly naked young boy wearing a top hat and holding a pen. To add to the creepiness factor of it. I think it might be like a Cupid or something, but it's just very odd, isn't it? By the way, it's a worker? Paper hat. Columbia was still used a lot, but World War I kind of disappeared. Not really used as a symbol for the U.S. again, as much, almost now. So the first one, the frontier was closed off. The Americans had always looked west. They still looked west with Pacific trade, China trade, but now the U.S. had conquered all this. They jumped across to the coast and then swirled back and conquered here. Where's the next conquest? Where's the next land? Where's the next place to get rich? Speculation. So there's an element of all of them. So the U.S. is already, moving west. That's one reason. Next one, the Panic of 1893. This horrific economic panic that sent shockwaves throughout the entire country. First off, it seemed like we needed something to unify the country. Two good examples about this unified and that's a picture of the Pullman strike, but remember Coxey's army. It looked like a revolution. And don't forget the Civil War was still only 30 years old. They felt like we needed something to unify the country. And a lot of people believed, and Teddy Roosevelt included, we need a war to unify the country. At a horrible cost, but wars bring that nationalistic idea together. Nationalism. And so, the other part of the panic is, remember that there's overproduction. If we have a surplus, let's get an empire to trade off our surplus, AKA a captive market. If we're selling too much for people to buy in the US, let's make other places buy US stuff. Our competitors will have tariffs. So this shows the massive increase in foreign investment as the US began to invest mostly in Latin America. That's US companies moving in and taking over that market. And here shows the dramatic increase of exports and imports after the Panic of 1893. So trade will open up financial opportunities, but also maybe avoid another panic. The next one fits in with this. Was a book by Alfred Thayer Mahan. Now the book is called, this is a very dramatic cover of it, The Influence of Sea Power on History from 1660 to 1783. So, what is 1783? He'd write a sequel. It's not as well known. I'd read most of this for a class. It's actually really hard to read. We've all had those. You're reading and then you read a page and realize, what did I just read? You know, just the style he wrote. But in it, the big thing is, he writes about what makes great powers. Why are there great powers? What about them makes them great? So he's looking at, okay, historically we saw this. What lessons can we learn and use? Which of course is the big reason for history. We can learn lessons from that. We can understand when people went through the similar ideas of it. We can also pick up pictures of people with big chins, but that's another story. So with that, the first thing is trade. Trade, as he saw it, made countries great. If they could trade, and he's thinking mercantilistic, they trade stuff, suck money in, that makes them great. So great powers have trade. And this then implies things like industry and finance down the road. So what you need is an empire. If you have an empire, you can get raw materials, you can get trade, but more than that, you can get so much more with this empire. You control markets. Well, let's get to the biggie. Here's the problem. Let's say the United States wants to trade with China. A stronger country might be able to cut off that trade if they want to and suck the wealth of the United States and strangle it. So to do this, we need a navy. And this, in many ways, is a book on how Britain became a great power. It's not 100% historically accurate. There are big flaws in it. But he's laying this out as Britain is great because they have a navy. Since they have a navy, they can protect their trade and protect their empire. No other country can do that. And Britain had the most powerful navy in the world in 1900. They have the most powerful navy in the world for the next 40 years until they, for World War I, they broke the bank, and so they couldn't quite do it anymore. But that's why Britain is great. So Britain, their trade is always protected, and they can hold other people essentially hostage. Great powers need a navy, but it's more than that. You need bases too, or you're at the mercy of a stronger country. Okay, 1890, coal-fired steam turbines became the most potent engine. The problem is coal is really heavy, takes up a lot of room. So you need bases, aka coaling stations, and this is why I chose this map. See these little red or yellow dots? These are all areas that the United States would take eventually, not so much for the empire itself, but as coaling stations for the US fleet. So we have bases to protect all the way to, for example, our new colony in the Philippines or the China trade. Because there'd be no other reason for Wake Island. I mean, it's literally a atoll with no water, but it's a coaling station. And it still is an American colony. Same with like Johnson Island, Hawaii, Guam, etc. And other countries are doing the same thing too. And so, he also said one more thing. There'll be one big battle of fleets. Your entire navy should be built to build these bigger, more powerful ships. They're dubbing them battleships by them. and fight one big battle. And that's what everybody in the world began to think about, this one big battle. Talk about Mahan. He'd have great influence all the way through World War II. And this would influence the United States for empire, build a navy. It also influenced Britain somewhat. Britain's like, yeah, that's why we're great. This is awesome. And they would want to build even bigger and better ships. It would influence two other countries too. Great powers that were relatively new on the world scene. In fact, one was a brand new country. Anybody know those countries? Germany was only 20 years old. And they always had a powerful land army. Had the strongest army in the world. But they started to build a navy. And that put them in direct competition with Britain. And that in many ways would be the stepping stones to Armageddon. World War I. What other country? Yes. Exactly. You can see it right here. And it's Japan, modernized. And they spread their empire out with a powerful fleet. Do you see them coming in conflict with somebody, perhaps going another direction? World War II in the Pacific would very much be an imperial war. A war for empire. Okay, World War II in Europe is a little different. Next, imperialistic fervor. And I can't begin to tell you what a big deal this was. We in the U.S. were saying, look at all these great powers. The United States is great too. We should have our moment, as Germany would say, our place in the sun. We are a great country. And this is blatant nationalism. Our country is great. We should have an empire. We should make our presence on the world scene. So here's a satirical magazine for Britain, implying Britain and the U.S. will dominate their hemispheres. Or here's, this is Cecil Rhodes, but it's representing Britain, now lying astride of Africa by the 1890s. And here's Uncle Sam, another cartoon 20 years later, doing it to the Americans. But this is nationalism. We are going to make our country great because it is great. Therefore, we're going to make it great because it's great. And so on and so on and so on. Intense nationalism. And then lastly, to justify, here's the British Empire. The map is a little bit dark. All these areas in red were under the British flag by 1919. And so that was, kind of justifying Mahan's idea. Look at Britain, look how great it is. Look at the empire, it's all red. The sun never sets on the British Empire. Yes, it would break the bank and they would lose it all. And the areas they left would be ruined, but, here's Uncle Sam in the same process. Here's baby Uncle Sam in 1783. And look how Uncle Sam grew, and then after the Spanish-American War, look at us. Coming out of our britches. But here's the biggie. These are the other great powers now like welcoming us on the world stage. What's your phone out for? Is it an emergency, you think?
No.
Okay, wait. Lastly, social Darwinism. Social Darwinism, we've talked about this before, but that thinking would dominate, would justify is a better word. John Fiske would have such huge influence. He was just getting involved in this new biological or genetic science. And in it, he would write a book based on pure or little bits of true science and then a lot of sciencey garbage called The Hierarchy of Race. And he laid out that there were 37 and then later 39 different races in the world. And there was a clear hierarchy from top to bottom. Certain races are on top, certain races are on the bottom. And here's a diagram showing 5 of the races. And this picture really shows how social Darwinistic thinking works. And it's also, therefore, it fits very nice. It dovetails. I use that word for Mr. Larson. It's a running joke we have, but he's down the hall. He didn't hear it. And jokes are so much better when nobody understands it and you try to explain it and they still don't understand. Then you know you got a winner. Okay, back to this. So it fits in very well with racism. It's perfect fit. So here are the 5 races. If you can't read it, it's It's Mongolian, Ethiopian. Remember what I told you, this is garbage. This is not true, this is sciencey garbage. Malay and American. And you notice then in the middle is Caucasian. Don't you notice a lot of things right away? Look at their dark, in the shadows, leering off the side, kind of sinister. And then look in the light. It's her, she. And if you look at this picture, what might you think about her?
She's the best.
Not only that, because she's in the light and clearly over, what else? What's that? Say it again.
I said she's an angel.
Oh yeah, that's actually a good way to look at it. They want to look like an evil man. And what else? She is beautiful, and they're not. They're trying to say that. They're the dark, they're sinister, they're leering, they're evil. She's vulnerable, isn't she? And so this implies that if we don't push the white race on top, and they're very clear about this, they will become vulnerable to inferior races. So it is the duty to colonize other places. And this would be done from a poet by the name of Rudyard Kipling, White Man's Burden. It is the duty to civilize them, because if we don't, these savages will take over. And this is a classic cartoon of it. Does anybody know who this represents? It's Teddy Roosevelt and the Rough Riders. And they're going up San Juan Hill in the Spanish-American War. So it's representing the United States. And they're making a sacrifice. But he is carrying, now this is Cuba. And first off, look how they draw a Cuban. Look at the face. Do you remember those pictures I showed you of racism and how they would draw African Americans? Does that face look exactly the same? So, inferior, a savage, that's why they draw him like that. Even though Cuba, that's not Cuba, but that's what they're drawing. And what's he carrying him to? It's a school, aka civilization. At great sacrifice, because somebody died doing it. But we're doing our duty to bring civilization. We're justifying it. And racism would drip through this. One of the most popular books in this era was one of this stark telling that if we don't dominate these races, they will take over the white race. We must do this or they will get us. I think about people of the United States. Which, by the way, don't forget, this is the most racist time in American history. This is the most racist time in world history. Racism didn't really exist before that. The Rising Tide of Color was an international bestseller. And it talked about the threat against white world supremacy. And if the whites don't take power, look who's coming for them. This was another one from the teens. It wasn't as big of a deal, but it fits so well into us. This has become popular again in the United States. And worldwide, as there's a growing tide of white supremacy going again. But it comes from here. And one more. Pear's soap was a classic example of how companies use this to profit, but also how they justified imperialism through soap. Now, Pear's soap, here's the first step towards lightening the white man's burden. Lightening as helping bring civilization. This is Commodore Dewey, who led the U.S. fleet at Manila Bay, beating the Spanish-American War. But this cartoon, it's a justification for imperialism, and it is shockingly racist. So it's implying, see the little white boy helping. It's African, but they could have been anybody of darker skin than Caucasians. And soap represented the civilizing factor. And we can civilize, and look what happens with that. They become more white. Now that's meant to be funny. It's very racist, but it fits in with that attitude. So on that, naturally it's time to show you a little boy smoking a cigarette. And I know what you're thinking. The poor chicken, secondhand smoke, right? You with me on that? I bet you weren't ready for a picture of this, were you? Are you ready to practice a thesis statement, though? The answer is yes. Write a thesis. put in your margins, whatever, you got a couple minutes, please write this. And don't forget, take the main position of the statement, take a position, something in common that will tie these three things together. And then three very clear subtopics. So write a 5-paragraph essay, write a thesis, go. Time. So write a thesis statement, just for practice, just a little practice thing. Everyone home write it. If you want me to look at it, you can type it on chat too. Let's get another air purifier. When you're done, make sure you got the main point of the question, pretty much U.S. imperialism, some kind of position, nationalism or something, and then three very specific things. I've given you 5. That should be easy. I think it turns which one you better write the most on, which one you come up with it down. And then don't forget, those subtopics, the A, B, and C, that is essentially like a short idea on whatever you write. Explain what it is. In an essay, you want to give a couple examples. You explain what it is, but relate it back to your thesis. Fun? It's so weird with math on it. It's amazing how much I think everyone does looking at people's lips when they talk. And then we hear something like a little bit off, and then my mind goes, what is it? We got it? We done? Okay. Let's look at the A, B, and C thing first. That's the meat of your essay. What are some of the things you put down for that? Yeah, Jeff.
Alfred, Thayer, Mahan.
Yeah, Mahan's book. Huge influence. Is there another one? Yeah. Say it again. Yeah, hierarchy of race. That's social Darwinistic idea. Is there another one? Yeah, the panic. So that's the whole thing about economy and that. You can write a lot of things on that. Anybody put down, the closing the refrigerator, I think, would be a harder one to do. Did anyone do that one? Did you do that? I just think, to me personally, I thought, might not have enough information. But there's a lot. Open up trade with China. So you can do that. Anyone put down, I guess we got pretty much. Yeah, just nationalism, intense nationalism. I put that as my why. I'll show you mine. I always put a little more meat in it, because that's what I do. Because they all basically relate to that idea. You might have something pretty close to that? What was your why? Perfect. That's right. The whole point about that is something that kind of ties them all together. Some kind of string that you can relate. You relate every paragraph back to that. If you can relate your paragraphs back to the why, then it's all connected. Now, the only thing about this is as for a regular essay, for a DBQ, you just have to grab the document. We got to do DBQ here pretty soon. No. We're going to do a practice one, it's just a sample, and then the one we're going to do a full one will be on the Treaty of Versailles. I know. Control yourself, we'll get there. This would be a good question. I would like this one. Hey, if you're going to have a question, let's have one like this. All right, then let me get to one more thing then. You want to see? Doesn't look like his hand is also like really big. But it's just his arm crossed, but it makes his hand. I don't think kids should smoke. There. I'm taking a stand. What do you think of that? All right. So Hawaii would be a classic example of how this happened. Let me quickly do Hawaii. Hawaii, in 1849, became a protectorate. A protectorate is basically we forced Hawaii to sign a treaty where we control their trade. This is what Britain would do when they conquered Africa. Now, have you ever heard of the term expats? Expats are somebody who lived in one country, then they moved to another one, expatriates. Expats from the US started buying up sugar and pineapple plantations. Pineapple became like gold. Pineapple became the most valuable fruit of that era. If you've ever had a fresh pineapple, it's pretty amazing. I used to grow them here in Montana. Even the pineapple you buy at the store that might be a month or old is still amazingly good. And by 1890, U.S. expats, U.S. planters, owned most of the good arable land. They either owned it or controlled it. It's complex. So Hawaiians have been kicked out. So these are Hawaiian laborers for an American planter. And it really depends on if it's the windward or leeward side of Hawaii. So that's Hawaii. The British also had an interest in Hawaii, but Hawaii was still technically an independent kingdom. And in 1890, a new queen took power. Queen Liliuokalani. There's the queen right there. And she eventually, the English, or whatever we look at, the Americified slogan would be Hawaii for the Hawaiians. She wanted to take back land, buy it from the planters, and give it to Hawaiians. That's called land reform. Give it to the Hawaiians. So there's the queen. Those are Hawaiian farmers right there. And so she wanted to try to reestablish independence. So break away from the treaties. And so she is a real threat to American planters. A real threat. And also look at her face. So look at her, look at how she looks like, she's Hawaiian. Very intelligent, incredibly brave, because she knows the attitude of the American planters. There's also a U.S. naval base at Maui, coaling station. And on those ships are naval infantry, Marines. And the planters have a well-organized militia. And they have basically a monopoly on firearms. So she's taking her life in their own hands. And look how they draw her. And this is a cartoon against her idea of land reform. And they really focus on this decadent rule by these natives. And this should remind you of the same argument used against the Reconstruction governments, the Republican governments in the South after the Civil War. And will be used by the Southern Democrats to try to discredit them. And look how they draw her face. That is nothing at all what she looked like. This is for Americans to take that caricature, that formerly racist caricature of somebody who's not white. It says gross immorality and scandalous government. And she's propped up, it says there, only reason she's in power are by, it's implying the US and its military. Now this is not true, but it fit in with the racist attitude of the time. And then, we're coming to these in quotes, the revolution in Ohio involving beards. In 1890, remember that McKinley tariff? That dramatically increased the tariff on pineapples. So the planters had to pay this tax. But they're also thinking, if we're annexed by the US, we don't have to pay the tariff. We're mad at the Queen, We don't want to pay the tariff. They drummed up the gross immorality garbage against Queen Liliuokalani, and they organized a coup. They used their militia to overthrow the queen, to stop land reform. And here's the thing. Not only do they have a militia, but U.S. Marines, the soldiers on board the ships, joined. Now, this was not ordered by President Cleveland. They just did it on the spot there. But they joined and helped overthrow the queen and created a new country. This should remind you of Texas. This should remind you of California. What's the country? Oh, the Republic of Hawaii, and that's Stanford Ballard Dole. He'd be the first provisional president. Not only do you have a great beard, but you've all probably eaten something from the Dole Corporation named after him. I checked my banana. I would have a banana on my lunch. It's Chiquita, which we'll talk about tomorrow, but Dole was last week. Thing about it was this. Annexation. Cleveland didn't like this. This conquest seemed un-American. It was against American values. Didn't the United States break away from an empire? And that's kind of what we're doing now. Even though didn't the U.S. already kind of do this in Texas and California, but that's another story. And so the United States did not annex this. It remained an independent republic with the Queen under house arrest for 5 years. But then there's a new president. And in 1898, President McKinley annexed Hawaii. Cleveland didn't like this, and this will be a big fight. Is it un-American? But in 1898, the United States annexed Hawaii. So Hawaii became an American colony. Oh. Well, I was going to show you one of the things, but the bell rang. Okay, so we got the jungle. If you get to me, if you got that tomorrow, that's fine. What are you not going to forget tomorrow? Or I will register you. And you will take 5 English 1 classes. Nothing wrong with English 1, but my guess is you've already done it. But only once. Wouldn't it be great to do it 5 more times? See you tomorrow. Have a good day. Right when you find work. And hang by your thumbs. Oh, I almost forgot something. Everybody listen. I'll give you the opportunity to read, if you did very badly on one of your short IDs from last Monday's quiz, I'll give you the opportunity to redo one you didn't do, so any one you didn't do, and redo that over the next 2 days and turn it in, I'll give you additional points. Sound good? Not full credit, but I'll give you some points.
So, could I recover like a half a point back if I decided it's limited liability on the short ID?
You only missed like 1 point.
Yeah, that was the only point I missed.
But you did really well. No, but you did really well.
Can I use the restroom?
I don't think you have that skill set. Sit down and be quiet. Go! You can't do that.
I know.
Like right away.
I know.
Go. Oh!
No, it's a joke.
Oh, everybody grab. We gotta grab one of these. Yeah, I'm excited.
Where did we turn in our registration?
Me, give it to me. And I throw it away.
When?
Today or tomorrow? Italian?
Kingdom.
Oh, the kingdom. Cool. I'm excited. We'll put this baby up. Oh, yeah. The Kingdom of Italy. This is great. Where'd you get it from? At Amazon.
Oh, I like.
That is really cool. We need a pizza day. If we ever come back to relative normal, we'll have a pizza day, then we'll do it just for Italy. And the only pizza crust, then the 3 ingredients: tomato, mozzarella, pesto. Huh? That's it. We don't need anything else. Yes.
This is a game I've been playing for like a month. Keep on my Fortnite one.
Wearing my look is so bad.
It's bad.
I used to spend like $30 over and over again on my bill.
I know. I mean, you can give it to me.
It's like anytime something came out, I wanted to go beg my mom, can I use your card so I can.
This is really cool. Thank you for this. This is awesome.
It was for one scan.
Thank you. Okay, where does it go? I'll put it up. I'll put it back. I got it in my Beatles song.
In Valor, there's a 100 credits for $1.
Wow. Is that for me? Awesome. If you don't have your registration today, bring it tomorrow. If you got things with it, you have all your little forms to turn in?
Oh, I'm not ready yet.
Oh. I am. Don't sweat. Just please get it in. It's not a big deal. What they're going to do is they're going to take it and they're just going to type it all in. The council.
Oh, I just want.
Yeah, I was gone the day you got me. So
Oh, yeah. You've been gone for a while.
Yeah, my sister.
When did we
goes
do that?
inside.
So you didn't get it though, huh?
No.
When do we do that? When do we bring it to
Today or tomorrow.
Just any time or like?
Yeah, but you can either, you can give it to them or give it to me and I'll just bring them all together.
Yeah. Do staple these?
Huh?
Staple these?
Staple these.
You printed
The schedule, the.
Oh, you printed it out? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry. I was,
Yeah.
well, I saw the paper and I was like, what the heck is that? Or I'll staple this. Put your fingers or two, I'll get it to the correct. The swing line. Ooh. I have a red swing line, but that's at home. Really, really cool. If you don't have this today, please give it to me tomorrow. As soon as possible. You have to get your account, that's fine. But I'll just bring them all up as a stack. And remember what I told you, take electives, take classes, take advantage of this. There's a lot of great classes, even in other departments. I know. That's good. Next, I signed this over the weekend, but I don't believe you didn't check it. I originally put this, and it's going to be listed as due on Wednesday, but it's going to be due on Thursday. Because I wasn't thinking about Monday being off. Huh?
Oh, excuse me.
I've been, yeah, I'm all messed up. See, now it's already on Tuesday. See?
Dude, cool. But we still have to come tomorrow.
So, yeah, you know, everyone, you have to be here tomorrow, you know. Yes.
I won't be here
Are you doing something fun or something?
No.
tomorrow. No, I'm going to Billings.
Oh, that
Just
is-
remind me.
Okay.
That's a fun.
We just got to get out of here
I
as
know.
soon as possible. And every day it gets harder. Even I know I'm telling you what you already know.
Yeah.
All right, so here, this is on the jungle, and Upton Sinclair was trying to write about the plight of workers, working conditions, but by writing about, okay, he put the main character in like 1,000 different jobs in a year. So it's not very realistic that way, but actually the conditions at the workplace were very realistic. And this had such great effect, just not quite the effect that Sinclair thought. And so as you read this, and if you already printed this out or read it online, just think about it going back. But please get cutthroat competition in there. Focus on cutthroat competition. Oops. And when I mean cutthroat competition, I mean